Well, hello there, everyone. I make that just after 3 p.m. UK time, which means to me that we should be kicking off. My name is Colin Webster. I met you all last week, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you again for this From Linear to Circular London edition webinar series. This is week 2 of the webinar, and this week we're looking at design for a circular economy. We've got a special guest for Design from a Circular Economy, but we've got something else that's very special for you today as well, which is a special co-host to be alongside me. But more about her in just a second. I want to tell you that we've been asked by a lot of people about the selection criteria for what comes next in terms of the face-to-face workshop. At the end of this session today, we're going to talk a little bit about that, about the selection process for that. I know many of you have questions about it, and of course we'll be able to continue that conversation once we move on to Slack. I see a lot of people are introducing themselves in the chat window and saying hello again, and any clarifying questions you might have for today's webinar will be picked up by our team of EMF staff who will be in there and answering those important questions for you. Anything else that can be parked for example, being answered on Slack, we will do that on the Slack channel when the time comes. Now, last week, you all behaved yourself so well that we decided you needed an upgrade in terms of who my co-host would be this time round. So we searched throughout our entire organization and we found for you, possibly, in our own words, the best co-host there could ever be. I'm going to hand you over right now to my co-host for today, Anna Querol.
Colin, well, I'm really happy that I can be with everyone today, and yes, I think that Colin has set like really high expectations. But yeah, so my name is Anna Querol, as Colin said, and I'm really happy and I'm very excited about the session of today because I'm part of both the learning and the circular design team at the MacArthur Foundation. And we have a very special guest also today. And before introducing them, so before introducing the special speaker, wait, I heard something.
Carry on, Anna, you're fine.
Okay, it's great. So before introducing the speaker, what we will be talking about today, it's about the mindsets and strategies that we need to design for the circular economy, why many of us might be the designers of the circular economy, but we are not even aware of it. And we've got also some interactivity ready for you. You might have received and seen a link to the red pen on the Slack channels. And if not, make sure that you have access to that one. And we'll make sure and we will try to have our guest answering as many questions as it's possible. So yeah, get ready for the session and remember to ask the questions in the Q&A box and anything about not content related in the normal chat.
Actually, Anna, I don't think we've got a Q&A box this time round.
Okay, no.
But we do have a question for our audience, don't we? We weren't able to set up a poll. I know you wanted to ask everyone a question they can answer in the chat window.
Yes. So we've got a question for everyone, and it's the following. Do you consider yourself a designer? Yes, no, maybe. Maybe you are just super confused now because you never thought about this. Just write on the chat and we will see like what's going on in this like flow of
I saw yes weirdly, someone wrote. Somehow, it's a good answer. Mostly
maybe
yeses.
no, mostly.
Like
I mean, in some ways, no, prefer assistant designer, no, all designers in a way. Honestly, system design, we must somehow designing. Wow.
Very few no's in there. That's really interesting. But even for anyone who says that they're absolutely not a designer, there's going to be something for them in this session, isn't there, Anna?
Yes, we are going to challenge this thinking. And maybe we finish the session thinking that we might be like designers up to a certain extent. We also don't want to undermine people who have taken like the whole education of design. It's more about like the concept that we relate or the meaning that we relate to this concept of designing for the circular economy. So yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Now, you asked another question today of everyone, the Monday question, which controversially you asked on a Tuesday. I guess that's a designer innovation of yours. Do you want to just remind people what that Monday question was and some of the responses you've seen?
Yes. So the question that I posted today on the Monday question channel was, what's your favorite circular design solution? And well, I'm sorry that it was posted today, but I'm really glad that people were quite active and interacted very well. I have to say that there are many answers that link to the concept of product as a service or product service systems, which is great to start with because it challenges the concept of having to own products or materials like by the user. And there's also like some of the comments that go with the lines of supply chains and how can we redesign collaboration models between different companies. So I think that those are quite outstanding and common answers. Did you see anything, Colin, that surprised you or you thought,
Well, the one thing that struck me was there's quite a lot of high-level concept answers as opposed to what I thought we'd see, which would be product-based. I thought someone might say, I don't know, mud jeans, for example, is my example, is their example of it. And even in the comments just now, Alexandra is saying cradle-to-cradle concept, so reinforcing that we've got a lot of conceptual thinkers on part of this course. I guess that's what we're learning from that. And that's great to see because I love thinking in large concepts as well, as opposed to drilling it down to the product level. But we'll have more time and people can continue answering that Monday question as the week goes on. We did set homework last week at the end of the first session, and we want to just reflect on that very quickly. I'm going to share my screen because Anna and I looked through all of your Giphies, and if I do this and this, we're going to see some of them. Oh, hang on. This was my favorite moment of this entire group. I clicked on all of the available channels, and what's really nice about Slack is that everyone's been busy creating their own channels on Slack, and this one really stood out for me, the best trio channel featuring 2 members. I think they deserve some sort of round of applause for being the best trio of 2 members. So
innovation above everything.
Of everything else. Right, some of the best Giphies, I've picked a few out here. There was loads of them. Oh, and of course, once you put them into a PDF, they don't animate. Oh my, that's pretty dumb of me, isn't it?
No, it's great. It's just a teaser so that we all go back to that channel and scroll down again.
That's why I did it on purpose.
Right?
Yeah,
yes.
So this one actually gives you a headache if you look at it for too long. Sarah Salerno's posted it. There was a light bulb and there was a tree and there was the sun, and it captured my attention when I first looked at that one. There was this one here featuring this geezer from the Truman Show, and this was all about having the power. Knowledge is power is the point that Anisha was making for this Jim Carrey piece. And then finally, I grabbed 3, although we only see 2 of them. I took the Minions one posted by Claudia simply because I think you're contractually obliged to put a Minions Giphy up if anyone asks you to put up a Giphy. So that's why I struck that one off. And then the dandelion one, which I think is brilliant. And it's a great metaphor for how ideas can spread, because the dandelion is so versatile and so resilient. So those are those I picked off. And Anna, you want to talk about a couple you've chosen?
Yes, let's do that. I also love the Minions one, by the way. Their excitement. So yeah, I picked this one that Daniel shared because it's this dog trying to move into a new paradigm or whatever, but they can't because it's got their linear system with it, and he needs to try to find a new way to enter. So probably he needs to use the tool in a different way or choose another tool. Yeah, I found that a very good analogy. Next one. what else? Ah, yeah, and then a couple more. So there's this first one by Mingyong Huang. And yeah, chills, literally chills. Because when I think about it, like there's so much unknown now. And I think that everything needs to be redesigned. So it's up to us to choose how we do it. And this how it gives me chills as well. So I found that really funny. And the last one, it says, it's time we change the narrative, by Helga Jordal. Yeah, and she wrote, it's time of huge opportunities. Let's rethink our products and services, indeed. And I think it's also time to explain the story in different ways so that we can touch different people. How would you call it? We can reach different people and find make this concept appealing to different people as well.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I think it's time we introduced our special guest today.
Definitely. So let's introduce our guest. He's Simon Whitmer, and he's been working in the foundation for some time. He'll already explain. And well, we have a question for you, Simon, before you jump into the content that I'm sure that we're going to learn a lot. How have you developed your interest and expertise in circular design, and what's the story there? It's Simon here.
Yes.
Cool.
I just lost you for a second, Anna, and I thought it's I thought it's on purpose to build some suspense. Let me know if there's any issue with the connection here. Thanks a lot for the intro. How did I come to the topic of circular design and my interest around it? For me, I think it might be easiest if I share a visual around that. Let me go and share my screen. So for me, everything started really like 5 years ago. Can you see this? All right. It started here on this beach in Bali. And I was surfing on the same beach. I was actually surfing a couple of years earlier, and everything transformed. And since you are all already a little bit familiar with the circular economy, it's not your first webinar, you know that the circular economy is not only about end of pipe solution and about waste, but what I realized in this moment is, instead of like just cleaning up every day and dealing with the symptom, we need to go upstream. We need to find a new way to design. We need to find a new way to actually create these products so they don't end up coming back on such a beautiful place like this. So for me, that was really like an important moment where I realized we can't just deal with end of pipe symptoms. We need to go upstream. And I found the opportunity to join the foundation and to work on the first systemic initiative with a few fellow colleagues. And that was around how can we redesign the plastic system? So how can we actually create a system that works from the outset? And what we realized very quickly is that design is very important for that, and design not in the sense of graphic design or just product design in a narrow sense, but rather the creation of products and business models and material choices in a wider sense. So that for me was the entry point when I came to the foundation. It also then opened my eyes to the possibilities around the solutions that are possible, like ranging from new materials to actually new ways of doing business. And this here are a few examples of innovators and people who are coming up with new circular solutions in the new plastics economy space. So I'm gonna use that a little bit as a theme today. The plastics packaging sector as a very challenging industry and a very challenging context to apply circular design principles. That was the long answer to your question, Anna. thank you everyone for joining today. I think it's going to be really exciting to create this session together with you. And I'm not going to present too many slides. I'm actually going to go back to Zoom if I find it. All right. Can you still hear me?
We hear you, Simon.
All right. Okay. There was a slight technical issue there. Exactly. So the question today is, of course, what is circular design? How can you apply it? And why does it matter for the circular economy? And rather than giving you a formal description of what design is, and we have already seen a little bit in the chat before that there's so many different views on what design is, I would rather give you some practical examples of where it matters and how you can start applying it. And that should help us actually to figure out on a more practical level what we can do as individuals. Now, coming back to the poll, are you a designer? It kind of reminded me of this. I read an answer by Sebastian that we are all designers to some degree, and it depends on how we put it. And that kind of reminded me of this tagline by Nike, that we are all somehow athletes. And that the question is just how our mindset is around that. You don't need to have a professional license to be an athlete, right? And similarly here, of course, there are professional trainings for designers, such as product designers and service designers. But equally, the process of designing itself is something that's relevant to all of us, whether it's the creation of a product or whether it's like the setup of a new business model. And that's what's really exciting to me, that we all play a role in shaping the future. We all play a role in making the circular economy happen by the way we approach the creation of products and services and systems. Now, is it only for people who are in a design studio, or is this also something that that you can get started on if you're outside of the design sector? This is something I want to illustrate with a few examples to give you a sense of in how many different forms circular design can actually happen. All right. I'm gonna share here a few of them. Okay, so the first important piece to realize is that design is important for the circular economy because it sets in motion what is later possible with your creation. So if you're designing a product, often really important choices are being made in that design stage that later influence how the thing can be used and what happens to it once it's not used anymore. And these choices, they can't be reversed really, because once you have your supply chain in place, once you have your operations in place, it's really hard to unscramble the omelet, to use that metaphor. So in the design stage, we make important choices about materials, but also the systems around them. And while often the things that are designed around us, whether it's the building that we are in, or whether it's the laptop or a physical product like a headset that lies here next to me, very often these things are designed with the user in mind. So we are quite good at being user-centered and zooming into that stage. But what is sometimes missing today is the perspective to the broader system, and to understand how that building or that headset or that laptop, how that actually flows, how the materials flow into another application. So understanding the system's perspective of what you create and how that solution fits into a system, that's something that's really important when we look at the circular economy. And as you might recap from last time, the 3 circular economy principles that we often refer back to when we look at solutions is, well, first, number 1, is something designed, do you design out waste and pollution from the outset? So how can we meet the need without even creating waste in the first place, rather than kind of trying to do something with the waste once it arises? Number 2, how can we keep the materials and products in use. And then the third one, how can we regenerate the broader system around it? And for design specifically, that leads to a few strategies that we can apply. And I'm going to go into a few examples, unless Colin, Anna, you have any questions here at this stage, or unless I haven't been clear on one of the points before.
I've definitely got one that's brewing, and perhaps you answer it later, Simon. It's about how did we become disconnected from the wider system and only create products for themselves? But maybe you answer that later, or maybe you want to tackle it now.
Yeah, I think I can answer it quite. I'll probably answer it best with one example afterwards. Or let me give it like a general description, and then afterwards I'll show you an example. When design in this sense was born in the Industrial Revolution, it was about how can we make sense of these new possibilities that we have in terms of technology. So how can we actually use that technology and that power to address user needs? And design has always focused on like being user or human centered and having empathy with that user journey and designing better solutions. So it's just natural that we empathize with the user and that we try to improve the solutions. And then on an economic level, the incentives historically have aligned with selling more stuff, because that's how you make profits. So selling more physical stuff, and often combined with planned obsolescence, would optimize your revenue stream in a linear economy. And now the question is, how can we reconnect with the broader system in a circular economy and address the needs without the material throughput? And going from products to services, I think will illustrate this very nicely afterwards.
Perfect, thank you.
Cheers. So a few of the examples of how people design, or strategies that people apply, and this is by no means an academic exercise or trying to be complete or exhaustive, but there's a few examples of how we see people apply the 3 circular economy principles in a design space. First one is to let go of materials altogether. So to go, for example, from plastics packaging or packing a content to actually going packaging free and delivering the content or what people want without the material element. The second one is around material choices. So how can we go from material choices that are either not safe or can't really flow back into anything else to safe and circular material choices? The third one is around longer product lives. So this goes a bit into this example of planned obsolescence. How can we, rather than selling and creating more stuff from a take waste system, go into delivering value and creating revenue streams, for example, through service models. And that's linked as well to from products to services which last longer. And there's the fifth strategy, which is around modularity, replacing the pieces that break the quickest, and then designing for the inner loops. So going for repair or remanufacturing rather than the recycling loop. Have you guys looked at the butterfly diagram last time in the introduction?
I think we briefly looked at it and we shared a video actually. Right,
okay, yeah, because I saw a few comments in the red pen which we'll look at afterwards, so we can refer back to the biological and the technical cycle when we go to that one. Now we'll look into one example each from people who are already applying it. So first, when it comes to dematerialization, we'll look at the example of Algramo. Actually, let me just dive into that right away. And Algramo is a new business model developed in Latin America, where the goal is to deliver the portions of the content, such as, for example, shampoo or also food items, in the right portion, so you don't need to buy the sachets. As you might be familiar with the problem of plastics packaging, one of the big issues is that we have these small items of plastics packaging which leak often. And a solution to this is to have this tricycle that goes around the villages and provides people with the small amounts that they can pay for in the moment, and designing out waste by just delivering that in the right amount in a refillable container. And that's one of the examples that we saw as a solution to the New Plastics Economy Innovation Prize. Then design for reuse. Here I've picked an example from a student design award, and I really love this example because it shows the power of following the user journey and finding a better solution for the user. And what Marie has found out with this solution is that when you actually look at a patient's journey, they have 4 single-use packs, patient packs. And what she found is that without any negative impacts on safety or the service to the patient, actually this could be integrated into one pack that follows the journey of the whole patient throughout the ambulance and then A&E and so on. Modularity builds on the concept that some design element or some parts that we design might be broken quicker and might need replacement quicker. So there might be different speeds of the parts in terms of the loops. And you might have had the same experience. I already had like one headset that was just made out of a plastic casing, and then it broke and I couldn't exchange or repair it at all. Had to throw away the whole piece. And instead, Gerard Street has shown that a subscription model of reusable or like modular components actually lets you, on the one side, pay less per month, and on the other side, replace the pieces that are broken. And on a completely different geography and also spectrum in terms of business model is the tool library in Toronto. This is an example from our EMF case study library, where you make accessible all these tools that we only use a few minutes, every one of us, right? So you know the challenge, you want to fix something, like you want to drill, or you need to like have the pressure cleaner in front of your house. I don't know how to say that in English. You only need a few minutes per year. So why would you buy one when you can actually borrow it from a library? And we have a little version of that in EMF. Actually, we have an EMF internal library of things that we share, and that we it's not a business model, but the tool library here is more on a viable business model level, where you pay a little fee for access, and you can use the tools that you wouldn't want to buy. Going from products to services helps us to align the incentives. So while in the old linear system, you want to sell a lot of physical products because that optimizes revenue. When you go to a service, you can actually design that for durability rather than obsolescence. And you can use better quality materials, and also designing for disassembly because you get it back afterwards. So owning as a company, owning furniture like in this case Arendt, and having a service arrangement with your clients can optimize your revenue stream, at the same time also improve design, and it's a great example of a circular business model. And then we come to the last one. And the last one, I on purpose chose 2 examples, again, to represent the biological cycle and the technical cycle. So Adidas Future Loop shows that a running shoe can be made with one material, and it can be shredded and be used again and again. So that's on a more corporate, large scale end of circular design. And then on the other side, we have the biological loop with materials that are actually fit for the biological system. So here we have, from Indonesia, a solution that builds on seaweed. I wanted to plug in the little video, but you will have to look it up afterwards on the New Plastics Economy Innovation side, where you actually also have examples of the sauces with ketchup that you can actually put in the hamburger with the packaging itself because it's seaweed, or the noodle soup where you actually dissolve the packaging because it's seaweed. So what I want to say basically with these examples is there's circular or designing for a circular economy comes in many forms. It comes in many shapes. It differs depending on the geographic context and your size of your organization.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Simon, because I think that we got like new insights and the idea that circular design strategies are not exhaustive and they are absolutely compatible. And it's about understanding where we are trying to create that solution, who is it for, what sector we are working on. So it's about taking into consideration many different aspects. And so I think Colin and I, we've been doing something at the same time, which was trying to read part of the chat. And that's a good exercise actually to...
Very tricky, isn't it, Anna?
Very tricky, but it's a good exercise, I think. And there are really good like comments and questions. Of course, as you might understand, we can't just go through all of them, but I'm going to read a couple that I think are interesting. So Liepa Olsauskaite, she's saying that she's trying to develop Algramo prototypes in Bangkok because they are her inspiration. And I think that it's great to have entrepreneurial people that find inspiration from somewhere and think about how can they replicate and adapt solutions in different contexts. Then we have also a couple of questions that might be more technical, but I think it's great to try to explain them a little bit. So one, it's about from Manasi Nandakumar. They are asking, does reuse fall under the design for inner loops or product life extension? Simon, do you have any?
Very, very good point. I haven't really talked that much about the designing for inner loops, which would prefer, like, would prioritize designing for reuse, right? Typically, I mean, this is quite, how shall I say, quite technical, and ultimately there's quite often there's an overlap or a combination of strategies that we see. But when you have the same item being used longer by one person, I would typically speak more of like product life extension. When you have the same item being used by multiple users or different groups, I would talk more about reuse.
Great.
I just saw something coming in there from Masa, who's talking about the challenge of scale, and I've seen comments similar to that come in. Simon, I think it's probably best if we park that to next week when we talk about the business case and business models, and indeed the week after when we talk about enabling conditions for a circular economy. But what I'm seeing are some sharp critiques of some of the examples that you're putting out there, Simon. And I guess it's really difficult, I always find, when I talk about examples of circular economy in action, to find something that's like purely circular.
Yeah.
Is that a problem that you find?
Yeah, it's, I think designing for the circular economy is such a creative challenge for all of us. It's, I think it's really a journey, and we are all quite at the start of it, to be quite frank. I think it's an iterative process where we get better over time. We find some solutions that are really great and inspiring on one dimension, but to find the one iconic solution that fits all, that solves all our problems, and that's perfect on every dimension, I think that's challenging, right? And I think we have to learn to constantly push ourselves and to learn from different examples and to learn from different ways of doing things better. And we have to accept that this will be an iterative approach, and that perfect solutions don't exist, I mean, at this stage. Yeah.
That's a really nice answer. So, for example, the Toronto Tool Library is an example of extending the use of something, but ultimately probably those products are ending up as waste. But you're interested, I guess, in that sharing side of things, whereas the actual product, the material selection and design of the tools themselves maybe isn't perfectly circular.
Yes, and I think there is an effect, or like there is an improvement of incentives when you have tools that can be used by more people and for longer, because you do have an incentive to actually use better quality materials. because you can split the cost across multiple people, right? So you would expect, and yeah, you also see that there's a Swiss construction company that rents out tools to construction sites, and you see that those tools are actually higher quality and a bit more expensive, but they can split the use time across more people than if everybody needs a drill that costs like £50, right? So you do see an effect there, but of course, just making it a library doesn't ensure that all the other questions are solved.
Yeah. Anna, I think you've got something else for us.
Yeah, I think I found like a couple of questions, and I think it's very interesting that we start touching upon like business models and other aspects. So there's one question that's from Rabia Elia Cup that's related to like their role as a person. And she's asking, how can someone without a design background become circular designer? What are your 2 or 3 tips, Simon, that you could recommend for becoming circular designer to anyone?
I think it's a learning journey, and we all can improve our skills. So there's like, if I could give you 3 tips and then you would be a master at something, it's like, trying to give a tip to become like a master violinist, playing the violin. you need to train and you need to improve. But what I think as a lens you could start with is to ask yourself, what is really the need I'm trying to address with this solution? What is really the underlying need? And whatever material I take, whatever business model I employ, how does that fit into the broader system? And then there's a few practical tools and resources that I can point you towards. So there's a circular design guide, which helps you practically within that mindset to actually apply some methods, as we call them. But ultimately, it's really like a mindset. It's mindset, and it's a set of practices that you build over time. And I think a really important point, Anna, and we are on the same page on this one, I think, is the importance of the community and continuous exchange.
Yeah.
And getting feedback and exchanging with other community members, because it's not that you and me have all the answers on every question. There's so much expertise and collective intelligence out there, and we all, by connecting and exchanging and learning from each other, can actually improve as circular designers.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So basically we need to get our hands dirty, try, test, prototype, validate, get feedback, and talk to different people and different organizations so that we can find like the way forward together, I guess. Colin, should we go to the next?
Yes, we should. So we designed an interactive graphic, which you've sometimes heard being referred to as a red pen graphic, to prompt you to be thinking more about materials and so on. And a lot of people have been commenting on it so far. I'm just going to post the link into the window here. And I think Simon is going to share his screen and give us some observations on what you've been saying within this interactive graphic. Here you are. Remember, it's rude to look at people's tabs that they've got open. But I think Simon's hidden all of his controversial ones. So Simon, what's this graphic all about for people who haven't seen it already?
I mean, it's just impressive to see the many comments. I've only been able to pick out a few of them. And I'm sure like there will be further discussions on Slack afterwards. But let me... Yeah, there is the point around planned obsolescence and how, for example, in IT, it can be a challenge to make revenues when you want to sell the next version of a laptop. And so how do you do that? What are business models that you can encourage people to stick with their Fairphone, let's say, for example, longer? How can you help them upgrade it with different versions, rather than trying to replace the full phone? That's one comment I found quite interesting by Shreya. And then I think there was another one here around the role of the biological cycle and technical cycle. I'm here in the commenting mode.
I think it's very, I'm quite a visual person, and I love how like randomly, users have decided that they would write their comments along the stick of the toothbrush.
Oh, really? Did you observe that? I haven't actually seen that part.
Yeah, if you look from a bit far, then you can see that most of the comments are added into like the toothbrush.
Simon, a question someone asked before was about safe material choices. Can you talk to us a little bit about what we mean when we talk about safe material choices?
Yes. We have worked with the Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute to look into the questions around materials in particular, because the goal or the principle to design out waste and pollution is core to the circular economy. At the same time, of course, we also want to make sure that whatever we have in a technical cycle, so whatever we have in terms of like plastics, metals, that those streams are pure and don't harm either during use or during production anyone. So like this, the reductionist thinking of let's just recycle, right? And not really looking at the broader system of what are we recycling or what kind of materials are we using and what is the effect of those materials during the use phase would kind of ignore an important part of the circular economy. So we want to both circulate value of materials, but also make sure that those are streams that are benign. Yeah.
And because you said cradle to cradle and then talked about recycling, you reminded me of Bill McDonough once saying, you know, what if recycling is the wrong thing to do? And we become perfect at it, then you simply become perfectly wrong.
Yeah.
Like you should be asking those fundamental questions about material choices and what's next.
Yeah.
Do you have a good example you go to when you talk about those safe material choices? Are there examples of firms that have taken that approach, eliminated toxins from the products they've designed?
Yeah, one example that springs to mind is in the context of fashion, for example. So we have this quite challenging industry of clothing, right? Which comes with certain challenges in the production process, especially when the colors are involved. And what H&M has proven with their Cradle to Cradle line is that actually we can have clothing that does fit within the circular economy. So I found that case study, which you can also find on our website, quite impressive, but it also applies to buildings. So how can we, that was actually another comment I saw on the red pen, I just forgot to highlight it. How can we apply this methodology of separating biological and technical materials in a building? How can we design it for disassembly and make sure that that we don't mix and make composites of different material streams? And there is the City Hall of Venlo in Netherlands, where we have a cradle-to-cradle building that actually integrates safe and circular material choices.
Yeah, and yeah, I just wanted to add to that, if someone is interested about buildings and how to separate materials and so on, we've got a report on the website that was co-created with ARUP and other organizations, and there are like 4 specific examples of circular economy applied in the building industry, just in case.
Right, we've had a question about designing out waste and designing from waste, which is always a dichotomy we tend to have whenever we speak to people about circular economy. In fact, I noticed some of the favorite examples of circular design sounded quite designs from waste to me. Yeah. Simon, where do we see the difference, and do we really think designs from waste are a problem?
If we only design from waste, and if we see that as the solution to the challenges we are facing with the linear economy, I think we'll never be able to stop the flow upstream. So if you just, if you just take whatever comes out and try to do something with it, first of all, you will never stop you tackle the symptoms. And secondly, also, what you have typically is not very well designed, because it's a mix of like different polymer and plastics, for example, different polymer types. So there's nothing wrong at all to, actually, it's a good idea to, instead of going for virgin feedstock. So like for new, new polymer or like a new metal to take recycled feedstock. There's nothing wrong at all with that. But I think we need to be conscious that if you want to change the system, we need to start upstream. And I think that should be the focus. And of course, in that process, we can then again like take recycled feedstock or renewable materials.
Okay, very nice, Simon. Lots of questions coming in, some aimed directly at you. I don't think we'll quite have the opportunity to answer all of them right here today, but certainly the design team will be coming in and answering questions on the Slack channel at some point this week. Simon, you wanted to give us an example of a product systems map, and which will ultimately lead to a piece of homework, I believe.
Yes. So in this kind of theme of plastics packaging, what I thought would be quite useful is for us to reflect on one example from our own context in our daily life and think how that sits within a system. So drawing a systems map. So systems thinking is really important in this context. Drawing a systems map around our everyday packaging object. And afterwards, I will upload to the Slack channel a few examples, or maybe a bit later once we have done the homework, of how that has looked like in a case competition that we have run. But really putting at the center of a systems map the product that we are looking at and understanding the loops, the feedback loops, and the causal relationships can help us to find better intervention points and better solutions. I'm just going to show two visuals around that and one resource that you can use. I'm going to share my screen for this one. So afterwards, have a look at the circular design guide, and there's one method in particular that will help you with the systems map, and that is the product journey mapping. So it helps you to understand the question of what happens next to my product. I mean, assuming it's a product. If it's a service, understand what material streams are necessary to provide your service. And then go one level further and say, okay, what happens afterwards? Because very often we just create something or we assume there will be a next stage, but we haven't designed the next stage. And here this template helps us to look deeper into that. And I want to show one example of a systems map in the linear economy. So understanding the chain that's involved with a particular design and how this actually leads to multiple issues or emissions and waste streams. And then how we suddenly, when we put it at the center and understand a circular model, how things can flow, how we can redesign a whole solution, and not just the product, but often also the whole package of service and system around it. So this is one example, but look at one practical example of a plastics packaging and try to map that for yourself. Is that helpful, Colin?
Sorry, I was muted there. Yeah, absolutely helpful. So you want people to draw a systems map for a piece of plastic packaging? Absolutely.
And that can include the stakeholders that are involved in the production and in the after use and reprocessing loop. But also, if you want to add additional layer onto it, the incentives, why the material flows would be possible in a circular model. For example, payments, right? You know, what are exchanges of value? But that's more like the advanced version. I think we should start with the material streams and then we can take it from there.
Okay, and to be clear, you're going to share a couple of examples in the Slack group to support people to get started.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also there's sorry, Colin.
Oh, go on.
No, like in the link to this specific circular design workshop, you will find an explanation of how to develop this activity. So, I mean, don't worry if now it's not clear. I mean, of course, feel free to ask questions, but there's a full explanation as if it was facilitator notes for running this activity.
And the circular design guide. Yeah. If one of the EMF team could post the link in the chat, I see someone's asking for that, that would be great. So people can get their hands on it. We're also being asked by Nico, is this an individual or is it submitted via our trio? It's for individuals to submit. So we'll post a link to what the homework is in the Slack chat. And if you could reply in a thread that's like a response underneath, then that would be fantastic. And over this week, we'll look forward to seeing the system maps you come out with, and we'll be reflecting on it as the week goes by and talking about them next week as well. Simon, I don't think you managed to catch what we did last week in our very first webinar, but we introduced a new feature. Well, it's an entirely new program, so of course it's a new feature, where we put someone on the spot and we challenge them in 60 seconds to tell us about something. We give them a subject matter, we tell them you've got 60 seconds to talk about it. You're not allowed to repeat anything, you're not allowed to hesitate, and you're not allowed to deviate from the topic. And you have to finish talking about it within 1 minute. Do you think you can rise to the challenge, Simon, when I give you a subject matter?
To be frank, I think you've really chosen the worst possible candidate in whole EMF to do that, but I'll give it a shot.
Okay, well, I saw someone ask a question in the chat window earlier, and I'm going to give that one to you. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds, no hesitation, repetition, or deviation.
You mean repetition back to what I said before, or within the 1 minute?
Within the minute. Within the minute. You can't keep. You can
Simon,
repeat the same word, but not the same concepts.
the audience is cheering up.
The
So
timer's ready.
This is where you meant the grilling, right? I was already thinking, when does the grilling start? And
The grilling has begun. You're getting a lot of support online here. Simon, your topic, you've got 1 minute to talk about, is biomimicry. 1 minute to talk about biomimicry, starting in 3, 2, 1, go.
So what better inspiration than nature? Nature has been here for 3.8 billion years. It has provided solutions within a system that can work in the long term. And it actually satisfies the needs of all the living beings within that. So that means we can take biomimicry as an inspiration to become better circular designers. We can look at what strategies nature uses, and we can apply them to our own principles and to our own products. Biomimicry can be found online as a Biomimicry Institute resource package. There's even a tagline where we can ask questions, ask nature. And I find that particularly helpful when we design circular solutions for the biological cycle of the circular economy. At the same time, you can also apply some of those principles in the technical cycle to improve your reuse and refurbishment design loops. So check out biomimicry and become better circular designers.
He's done it, everyone. Well done,
oh my
Simon.
God. I'm so impressed.
And that was fantastic. The 60
Yes.
seconds of biomimicry. And you told us about Ask Nature as well, which is a brilliant website full of design strategies people can take inspiration from. Look at the comments, Anna. People are loving Simon Widmer.
I mean, it was amazing, you know, like this is a teaser for our next webinar, I would say, about only biomimicry. So it was excellent.
I don't think we need an hour on biomimicry after Simon's 60 seconds.
I
Okay,
agree.
that's fantastic. Anna, have you got any final questions?
Anami or Anabi?
Yes, Anna, cue.
Anami. No, like I think there were some questions about the homework, but they will be also replied in the chat, in the Slack channel, sorry. So we can pick those later, I would say.
Okay, let me just pull up my slides I've got here. So for next week then, we're looking at business models and the business case. We'll have someone from what we creatively call our business team at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who will speak to us about the conversations that he has with businesses around the world, big ones, small ones, all sizes, and what it is that attracts them to the circular economy. And we'll be talking a little bit about business models in there as well. It's same time as this week at 3 p.m. Next Tuesday. We've got 2 pieces of homework for you. Simon's talked a little bit about creating a systems map, and we're asking you to share that on Slack. Keep your eye on the Slack channel, and we will post further information about that homework. And secondly, simply because we're talking about business models and the business case next week, we want you to tell us about your favorite circular economy case study, and that's something that we'll reflect on before next week's webinar as well, during next week's webinar as well. And then there's the trios, which we introduced last week. So find 2 people to form a trio with you, or if you're like the people in best_trio channel, maybe just 2 people. I mean, those people are mavericks and they've managed to create a trio with 2, which is fantastic.
I'm curious.
But before we go, I did say at the start we would talk about what happens for the selection process. So obviously, everyone who's on this call today applied to be part of a face-to-face workshop that the MacArthur Foundation had planned to run in a date I can't remember, June perhaps, it probably was June. But world events have overtaken us, which means that we can't run that event in June. What we hope to do, of course, is to run it at some point later this year. But it remains to be seen if that's going to be possible. Obviously, the situation's out of our hands and we'll just have to play it by ear to see. But we have managed, as a result of the situation, we've managed to invite not just 45 people to take part in this program, but 500 people to take part in this online program, which we've pivoted to instead. And we're really pleased that you are all here and on this call. And what we'd dearly love to do would be to hold a face-to-face element with hundreds of people, but unfortunately that just isn't possible for us. We are limited to numbers for a variety of reasons. So that means when it comes down to it, we're going to have to make a decision about who is invited to our face-to-face workshop. And that's not going to be an easy decision for us to make because we can see quite clearly we've got a fantastic group here. But we need to come up with a mechanism to choose who comes to that face-to-face workshop, of those who remain interested, of course. We don't have all of the details yet, but what we are going to do is we're going to set you up with something to respond to. Maybe it's a question or some sort of challenge that we'll ask you to respond to, and we'll set that for you around about week 8 of this program. So you'll have a couple of weeks to finish that off, respond to it, and get it into us. And when we come to make a decision about who gets the invite to the face-to-face workshop, we'll predominantly focus on your response to that prompt. And on top of that, if we still find it difficult to separate you, we'll go back to your initial application form. And of course, it was your application that got you here in this program. So it's the prompt that we'll give you that will drive our decision. What won't drive our decision is your participation in conversations in the chat window and in Slack. Don't feel you have to perform for us. Right, that's really important. I don't want people stressing out that they have to be seen, that they have to be saying the cleverest thing or sharing the funniest Giphy. Please do share the funniest Giphies, we love them, but that's not how you'll be picked for the face-to-face element. So I recognize that you probably still have some questions hanging about that whole process. Please, I hope you recognize that we haven't fully formed this idea yet, but we're pretty certain about the direction it's going in. The place to ask us for clarification is in Slack. Please don't email us because we'd much rather answer to all of you than to one of you at a time. So ask us questions about this in Slack and one of the open public channels, and we'll be open and honest with you about things as they develop. So there you go, that was quite a monologue. I have really enjoyed this session once more. We only had a chance for one 60-second challenge, and Simon rose to that challenge quite magnificently and gave us a terrific performance overall on circular design. Simon, before we say goodbye, 3 things you want people to take away from today's session about circular design. What would they be?
Number 1 is whenever you create something, think about what will happen to that afterwards and how does it fit within the broader system. 2, look at the design guide, the circulardesignguide.com, as a free tool for you to use. And 3, connect with other community members and exchange and learn on that journey of circular design.
That's fantastic. Okay, Anna, you've been a fantastic co-host. Thank you for that.
Simon,
you've been a great
guest.
guest.
For inviting.
Okay, so until next week, everyone, we'll see you in the Slack channels and we'll see you on LinkedIn. Okay, goodbye for now.